There's a strange word that keeps resurfacing online, a word tied to old maps, grand architecture, and an unsettling idea that refuses to die: Tartaria. Some call it a lost empire erased from history. Others say it was never an empire at all, just an outdated label on old maps. But here's the part that hooks people. Why does the name appear across centuries of cartography and then suddenly vanish from modern memory? Was it a forgotten region, a misunderstood term, or something far bigger, something that got quietly rewritten out of the story? Tonight, we're not going to prove Tartaria. We're going to do something more dangerous. We're going to trace the breadcrumbs and ask why the Tartarian narrative became so powerful in the first place.
Let's start with the boring truth, because the boring truth matters. On many European maps from the 1500s through the 1800s, you'll find huge regions labeled with names like Great Tartary, Tartaria, or Independent Tartary. In historical usage, Tartary was often a broad term Europeans used for vast parts of northern and central Asia, regions they didn't fully understand, couldn't easily travel through, and often described loosely. It wasn't always one unified empire. Sometimes it was more like a cartographic placeholder, a big label covering many peoples, languages, and political systems. So yes, the name appears on old maps. That part is real. But here's where things get interesting. If it was just a loose label, why do so many people today feel like something was erased? Because Tartaria isn't just a word. It's a doorway into a deeper suspicion that history is incomplete, controlled, or selectively remembered. And that suspicion finds fuel in three places: maps, buildings, and disasters. This is usually how the Tartaria rabbit hole begins. Someone sees an old map, they notice Tartaria labeled like a major territory, they compare it to modern maps, and it's gone. And that triggers the question, did someone erase it? But map labels are not permanent facts. They change for all kinds of reasons. Explorers reach new areas and redraw borders. Empires collapse or rename themselves. Languages shift. Cartographers standardize terms over time, and sometimes old labels simply fall out of use. So disappearance alone doesn't prove a cover-up. However, the emotional impact is real, because when you stare at Great Tartary stamped across a huge stretch of land, it doesn't feel like a casual label. It feels like a missing chapter. And once you feel that, your brain starts looking for the missing chapter everywhere else. That's where architecture enters the story.
The Tartaria theory doesn't survive on maps alone. It survives on images. Grand old buildings, giant domes, ornate stonework, cathedrals, courthouses, train stations, universities, structures that look expensive, precise, almost impossible. Online, people ask, how did they build this without modern machinery? Why does it look like a lost civilization? Why are there so many similar styles across different countries? Then the theory makes its leap. What if these buildings weren't built by the people we're told built them? What if they were inherited? This is where the narrative becomes cinematic and dangerous, because it starts converting awe into evidence. But here's the reality. Humans have built breathtaking architecture for thousands of years. Precision craft existed long before computers. Labor forces were massive. Engineering knowledge grew fast in the 1700s and 1800s. And yet, even with all that, there are still details that make modern viewers pause. Because some historic buildings feel like they belong to a world that was bigger, more organized, more unified. And that feeling becomes the emotional foundation of Tartaria. Then comes the third fuel source: disasters. At some point, the Tartaria story merges with another viral idea: the reset. A catastrophe, natural or man-made, wipes out a previous world. A new society rises on top of it, and the old structures get buried, repurposed, and renamed. This is where mud flood enters. The claim usually looks like this. Cities have windows half underground. Old photos show streets being raised or regraded. Basements and tunnels exist beneath major cities. Some districts appear layered, like older ground levels were buried. Then people connect the dots. Something happened, something was covered, something was reset. Now, here's the key point. Layered cities are real. Regrading is real. Raising street levels is real. Basements that used to be ground level are real. But the jump from cities evolve to a global forgotten empire was erased is a leap. A powerful leap. Because it offers one simple explanation for many complicated urban stories. And simple explanations spread faster than complicated ones.
So why does Tartaria feel real to so many people? Because it taps into a real experience. Most people don't trust institutions. They don't trust official narratives. They've seen history rewritten in small ways, names changed, stories simplified, inconvenient details ignored. And when you combine that mistrust with stunning architecture, old maps, and dramatic disasters, you get a perfect storm. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't need a hidden empire for history to feel hidden. History can feel hidden simply because education is simplified. Local histories get ignored. Many archives are difficult to access. Most people never learn about regional cultures across Central Asia, Siberia, or the steppe. And older European terms blurred multiple peoples into one label. So the hiding might not be a conspiracy. It might be something worse. Neglect, oversimplification, and the human habit of compressing complexity into a single word, like Tartaria. If Tartaria was a unified, advanced empire erased from the record, what would we expect to find? Not just memes, not just dramatic narration. We would expect clear primary sources describing a centralized government across that entire region. Consistent internal documents, laws, taxes, censuses, official languages across the territory. Archaeological layers showing a sudden civilization-wide collapse matching the theory. Independent historians and regional experts supporting the same conclusion with verifiable sources. Without that, the most honest framing is this. Tartaria on old maps was a real term, but the erased super-empire narrative is a modern interpretation built from wonder, mistrust, and the internet's love of mysteries. And still, there's something valuable here, because the theory points to a real gap. A lot of people don't know the histories of Central and North Asia. They don't know how empires, tribes, khanates, and states changed over centuries. They don't know why European maps looked the way they did. So the internet fills the gap with a story that's easier to consume, even if it's wrong.
So, what are they hiding about Tartaria? Maybe nothing. Maybe the hiding is simply the distance between modern education and the complexity of the past. But if you want a reason this story keeps coming back, here it is. Tartaria represents a hunger for lost knowledge, for hidden chapters, for a world that feels bigger than the one we were taught. And in that hunger, the internet created a myth powerful enough to compete with reality. Because sometimes a myth doesn't need to be true to reveal something true about what people feel is missing. In the next video, we'll do something more specific. We'll take one of the most commonly cited Tartaria buildings and investigate what we can actually verify: construction records, architects, dates, engineering methods, and why the style repeats globally. Because if you want the real mystery, it's not whether Tartaria existed, it's why so many people needed to. Thanks for watching.